You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. Make sure to support Purity Coffee as they continue with their Front Lines Initiative campaign. Just go to puritycoffee.com, use promo code PODCAST for 10% off your first order, and Purity will match whatever you purchase and send it to medical professionals on the front line of the COVID crisis. Nurses, EMTs, and doctors will stay energized with healthy, organic Purity Coffee thanks to your purchase. We are very proud to be working with Purity Coffee here at the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, so we love what they're doing with their Frontlines initiative. Today we have Dr. Wolfson, that's right, a cardiologist, talking about coffee and heart health and coffee and wellness and organic foods. Lots of great information in this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. Please make sure to share the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast with a friend, with a peer, with a colleague. Give us a good rating and review. We do appreciate it. All right, without further ado, thank you all for tuning in today. Enjoy the show. Hello, podcast listeners. Thank you for tuning in to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast today. I'm your host, Jordan River, and we have a very special episode. We are doubling back to talk about heart health. That's right, cardiology, with today's very special guest. He is a cardiologist, he is a natural wellness specialist, and he knows a heck of a lot about coffee and heart health. Dr. Wolfson is on the line. How are you doing today, Dr. Wolfson?
I'm doing fantastic, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me on. And coffee, no pun intended, or maybe it is a pun intended, is very near and dear to my heart. So I love to talk about it because there's a lot of people that want to drink coffee and they have been told or they think that it can be detrimental to the heart. So I think I want to clear up the air, if you will, on those topics.
Absolutely. I want to dive into those misconceptions and the research and the statistics. Before all of that, though, I'd like to give the audience a little bit of background on you yourself, your credentials as a cardiologist, and then what kind of brought you into this field of natural wellness and food medicine and all of that.
Yeah, sure thing. So I am a board certified cardiologist. I went through 4 years of medical school, 3 years of internal medicine training. I was a board certified internist, and then I did 3 years of cardiology training. And I finished all that up in Chicago back in 2002. And I then moved to Arizona, and I joined the biggest group in the state of Arizona, where I was there for 10 years. And I was a senior partner in the group, chairman of internal medicine, director of cardiology and cardiac rehabilitation. I was voted one of Phoenix, Arizona's top docs in 2011.
Nice.
And I was doing all the invasive hospital-based procedures, angiograms and pacemakers and all the high-tech cardiology stuff. And along the way, I would meet the woman who would become my wife. And she is a doctor of chiropractic, or as she says, DC for doctor of cause. And she really opened up my eyes that food is medicine and lifestyle is medicine, and that the mainstream approach of cardiology, where it's just so influenced by pharmaceuticals and surgical procedures. And really, that was kind of like new to me because as a cardiologist, really it's all we were ever truly focused on was the pills and the surgeries. So moving on from that, learning the truth opened up my eyes. And from there, it's been a whirlwind ever since. Opened up my own practice in 2012, Wolfson Integrative Cardiology, wrote an Amazon best-selling book in 2015 that is available for free, who anyone wants it, at freeheartbook.com. And from there, I guess we early on, my wife and I started into the coffee debate.
Oh, I see the coffee debate. Absolutely.
Well, when I was growing up, my father was a coffee drinker, coming up in Chicago and, the cold winters there. And it was just coffee was always a staple in our house. And back then it was big cans of things like Hills Brothers and Folgers and
of course.
And then, so I was drinking coffee when I was, before I was 10 years old, and we would go on road trips, right? And we'd stop in the gas station, and, my father would be driving all night, and he'd grab a cup of coffee, and I'd want to stay up with him all night when I was 10 years old. And so I said, "Pop, can I have some coffee too?" And he got me a cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup from the local gas station, and away we all went. And
Absolutely.
hence the love for coffee started. And then, of course, as a medical student and a resident and a cardiology fellow, again, it was coffee, but of course, it was just the wrong stuff. So when I met my wife and we started talking about coffee, and she's like, well, there's, it can cause adrenal fatigue and it can cause problems with your gut. And I'm like, okay, I'll do some research on that, but I really love this stuff and I don't want to give it up. But I'm willing to look into the science. And once you dive into the science, it's irrefutable.
There's a lot of studies out there, man. Yeah. Is it the most studied food product on the planet when you add up all those studies? I believe it is.
Oh, for sure. I would agree with you. I mean, obviously between coffee, I think, obviously we'll throw green tea into that mix as well. But, when you look at all that data and, we can break it down when it comes to heart health, but, what's really cool is that the science is done on most people, again, that were drinking the old big tins of Hills Brothers.
Right.
And if those people had benefit, can you imagine the benefits to drinking the best of the best?
100%.
That's what's really, really exciting.
Yeah. And honestly, Dr. Wolfson, that's why I'm so excited to be in my shoes on this show, because I'm literally having one phone conversation with Harvard medical doctors, and just having returned from Colombia, standing on a regenerative coffee farm. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, because of the testing that companies like Purity Coffee is doing, when you test those beans that have been farmed not just organically, meaning no pesticides and no synthetic fertilizers, but regeneratively, returning microbial life and fungal life to the soil, their analytical statistics go through the roof. The CGAs, the chlorogenic acid levels, through the roof. Malic acid, melanoidins, all of the positive compounds seem to produce more abundantly. I don't know what that is, but it seems to absolutely be the case. So I'm glad to hear from your side, kind of preaching the same ideals that we do on the podcast. It's good to hear that coming from a cardiologist. I'd love to dive into this heart health. So many questions around, where do you want to start? Maybe coffee and how it affects cholesterol or caffeine. Where do you want to begin?
Yeah, I love all those areas, but I guess I would, say that really, because you mentioned the organic piece of it, and I've always told people for years to drink organic coffee. I talk about it in my book. I talk about, again, no matter what you do it organically, because the pesticides, if they kill the pests, well, they're going to kill us. And actually, There's plenty of data. There was a study that came out a couple of years ago that looked at those people with the highest levels of pesticides have a much higher mortality risk or chance of dying compared to people with the lowest level of pesticides. And that was over a certain period of time. Of course, we're all going to die eventually.
Right.
But the idea is that if you look at people over a 10-year period, the group with the highest levels of pesticides are more likely to die. So I think that's really, really fundamental to what we're talking about here. And sure, we can talk about organic. And I know you've had other guests on there that really talk about that as well. To me, it's very, very, very important. And then when you're looking at the regenerative farming and how it actually benefit the earth and the air and the water and the soil. That's really next level, type thinking. But
absolutely, Dr.
another
Wolfson.
thing that I'm big on, too, that I know you guys are very, very, or at least the people at Purity are very big on, is what and why I gravitated towards Purity, is that the fact that mold and mold mycotoxins are so prevalent in coffee, and the fact that Purity goes through the absolute length to make sure that it is not in the coffee. I don't want to put words in your mouth and say there's none in there at all, but obviously the less amount we can get, the better.
No
and
mold
the
or mycotoxins.
Ramifications of mold mycotoxins are extensive.
Can we talk about that? That's fascinating. I'll tell you, Dr. Wolfson, there's a little bit of controversy around this subject because there were some really famous coffee producers and some really famous podcasters that were kind of getting into a feud over false claims about mold. I've spoken to Ildi Revi. she's seen, I've heard her say, I've seen the papers. We've tested we've tested coffees on the market. There is mold, there is mycotoxins. My listeners remember that episode. So it's definitely prevalent in the coffee world. And if you're drinking this every day, you got to be thinking about that. Now, you're telling me that these mycotoxins, I mean, I'd imagine, of course, they'd affect your gut, cause inflammation and do all these things, but they're actually bad for the heart.
That's correct. So as you mentioned, obviously what damages the gut and what's bad for the gut is bad for the heart. And I've coined the term or the phrase leaky gut, leaky heart. So if we know that the mold mycotoxins lead to leaky gut, well, it also leads to leaky heart.
Wow.
Where the blood vessels, which are lined with something called the endothelium. The endothelium does not function normally because of mold mycotoxins and other factors, but mold mycotoxins lead to endothelial dysfunction and damage. And now immune cells get into the inside of the blood vessels, setting up shop and leading to cardiovascular disease.
Oh, fascinating.
And then on top of that, I test for mold mycotoxins in my patients. It's a urinary test. We look at 31 different mold mycotoxins. And these are mold mycotoxins that, again, are proven in the literature to be linked to cardiovascular disease. And that could be atrial fibrillation, that could be hypertension, that could be a heart attack itself.
Wow.
So it is a major factor. So when I test people for mold and they come up positive with these mycotoxins, one of the first places I go to is the coffee, because I know so many people drink it. And when we replace that with the coffee that has, relatively speaking, 0 to very low levels of mold mycotoxins, I know my patients are going to do better. And I'll tell you this one more thing there, Jordan, is that when we retest these people 3 months later through multiple strategies, including changing out their coffee, their mold mycotoxin levels drop.
Wow. And they feel a difference in their wellness, I'd imagine.
Well, certainly. I think, it's, changing out the coffee is just one of the many, many, many things that we do. But it's an easy switch, Jordan, too, is that it's kind of like the easiest thing.
That's what I just said.
It's kind of like the easiest thing to
100%. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're telling people to exercise more, but are they listening? Say exercise 5 or 6 days a week. That's probably a harder sell than switch to this delicious organic coffee.
Right.
Totally
Or if you tell someone to give up sugar.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, my gosh. And that's something we say on this show a lot, Dr. Wolfson, is when you're drinking coffee that's of a high quality, you should be treating it like a medicinal beverage. And pouring a spoonful of sugar in it might not be the smartest thing. I'm sure as a cardiologist, sugar is it the number one enemy in your eyes?
Well, it's definitely up there, my friend. But but that's just the point, is that, as we said, it's so easy to switch someone's coffee as compared to, hey, I want you to go to sleep earlier. I want you to stop using your cell phone at 10 o'clock at night. I want you to, like you said, go out and be physically active. Or I want you to give up gluten or dairy or whatever we choose. It's like, I'm not telling you to give up coffee. I'm telling you it's healthy, just when done the right way.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep. I absolutely am right there with you, Dr. Wolfson. I feel like there's a kindred connection here. But I would love to dive into some research, some numbers, some facts here. Talk to me about coffee and heart health. Why don't we start with cholesterol? We have not covered how coffee affects cholesterol on this show yet.
Well, it's first of all, let me say this, and I talk about this in my book as well. And in fact, it's chapter 1 of my book is called Cholesterol is King, because we want people to understand that cholesterol is beneficial. That's why the body makes it. That's why all animals make it as well. That's why it's inside of an egg, because cholesterol is a necessary nutrient. But we want the perfect cholesterols for each one of us. So your perfect level is different than mine, is different than the next person. So in order to achieve that, we want to make sure that inflammation is low, because when the body is inflamed, when the body is irritated, one of the mechanisms to put out the inflammation is cholesterol and the LDL particle. So the LDL actually is a molecule that can be oxidized. So when you have high amounts of oxidative stress and you have all this inflammation, LDL goes to the scene and serves as an antioxidant. So if we flood the body with food-based antioxidants, then the LDLs don't have to do that. The LDLs don't get damaged, which leads to cardiovascular disease. So what we do find once again is that cholesterol numbers tend to improve or be better when people are coffee drinkers.
Interesting. Probably to do with the high level of antioxidants. You know, it's the highest dose of antioxidants you can get by far in the Western diet. So again, one of the things that came up on the episodes we've done on cancer, you know, we've talked about on this show how different cancers are essentially wildly different diseases, completely different biological makeups. Well, then why does coffee prevent so many different types? One of the reasons was anti-angiogenic properties, and another was anti-inflammatory properties. So I imagine it's kind of the same thing here: less inflammation, less chronic disease, less anti-wellness of any kind.
Well, again, that's what it's all about as far as the cholesterol, production is concerned. Well, we don't produce an excess of cholesterol because we have coffee on board as that antioxidant. And once again, cardiologists all know that inflammation is bad. They know that oxidative stress is bad.
Right.
The problem with conventional cardiology is that their approach is a pharmaceutical. And what you and I are talking about, the approach is certainly food-based, and obviously we can have conversations about all the different antioxidant qualities of food, and we're talking about coffee as far as its abilities here, but then other mechanisms again where sunshine and the production of vitamin D, well, that is an antioxidant. And getting appropriate sleep, allowing the body to recover and regenerate and to heal itself is so important. So again, there's so many different factors that are involved. But when it comes to lipids, there definitely is a link between improved lipids. And I think also is that as coffee and its antioxidant abilities improve the health of the liver, then again, you're going to get adequate cholesterol production, LDL production, and then LDL uptake as well by the LDL receptors in the liver to clear old LDL out of circulation as well. And I think also what's cool is that there's a lot of research coming out on the ability to increase HDL function, which is going to be one of the holy grails of cardiovascular disease. And I think that the phytonutrients in coffee are also going to be proven to improve what's called cholesterol efflux capacity, which is a sign of good HDL function.
Interesting. That's so fascinating. So again, kind of boosting the body's own defense mechanisms to optimize health and recover faster.
Yes, most certainly. Most certainly. I mean, listen, if we can do things naturally, that's the key. I'm not here to denigrate my old partners in cardiology. There's a time and a place for emergency medicine. But when it comes to prevention, that's really what we're talking about here is, can you prevent illness naturally with food as medicine? And I definitely think you can.
Oh, Dr. Wolfson, you're speaking our language. And I think that's the big shift that really needs to occur. What a blessing the advancements in medical technology we have here when it comes to critical intervention. We should be so grateful for that. But if we can move to this more preventative style, this more natural-based wellness style, that puts the personal responsibility back into the hands of the patients, which is incredibly empowering. And honestly, I've seen it. It's effective. This is effective stuff. If we can just get the education out there, get people motivated enough to do this, I know that there's always going to be medical issues out there, right? Random happenings that no one can control. But I think that when you look at the cardiology problem we have in this country specifically, what is it? 500,000 deaths from heart disease a year? We have to get a handle on our lifestyles. We have to get a handle on our prevention. No amount of exquisite surgery is going to fix this nation's heart problems. Do you agree with what I just said?
Yeah, 100%. The amount of people in the United States and around the world that are on blood pressure drugs, cholesterol drugs, drugs for atrial fibrillation, all of these chronic diseases that they are medicated for. What if we could reverse that, get people off of pharmaceuticals and truly healthy and well? And that's what I do in my practice in Arizona every single day. And again, coffee is part of that strategy, at the very least organic coffee. But that's why I sell Purity coffee in my office. And oftentimes, Jordan, I'll just give my patients a bag,
right,
as part of like their new patient intake. And when they see me for the first time, because I ask everybody about caffeine intake, I ask everybody if they're drinking coffee. And I got to be honest with you, I don't necessarily push someone to start drinking coffee if they're not a coffee drinker. I'm not there yet because I think there's other strategies. But the reality is that most people
already are.
They want to drink. They're coffee drinkers already.
Yeah.
Or they used to drink coffee.
Yes.
And they mistakenly were told to stop.
Exactly. You're totally speaking my language. That's the exact experience I've had. So now you're giving them permission to start up again and say 3 to 5 cups, as high quality as you can get. Here's some Purity coffee to get you started. I absolutely love that, man. But listen, you mentioned caffeine. We got to take a little left turn here. As a cardiologist, give me the breakdown on caffeine. I know some people with heart arrhythmias and things like that are scared of caffeine. I also know that the caffeine in coffee has incredible health benefits that decaf doesn't quite have. There's some synergy going on there in the coffee that doesn't happen elsewhere. What are your thoughts on cardiology and caffeine?
Yeah, what I tell people is that if you clearly have a problem where you notice that you don't like the way you feel on caffeine, then you're probably someone who should avoid caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
If you have palpitations, racing heart feelings from caffeine, then I think you should avoid it. There is no significant evidence that it increases blood pressure. In fact, I think it's the reverse.
Ooh.
There's no significant evidence that it increases heart rate in people with atrial fibrillation. In fact, I think it may be the reverse.
Wow.
We clearly have evidence through meta-analyses that coffee intake, actually coffee drinkers, have a lower incidence of atrial fibrillation. And atrial fibrillation far and away is the number one reason why people come to see me or contact me in Arizona. Atrial fibrillation is really a pain point for millions and millions of people. They take the pharmaceuticals, the procedures, and then on top of it, they don't like the way they feel when their heart rhythm is irregular, and they're concerned about the stroke risk.
Right.
So when you're able to tell people, not only is coffee not detrimental, but it's actually beneficial, then I think you really get people excited. And as we said before, for those people that were able to say, hey, I know you quit, and I know you miss it, and I know you miss it a lot, I'm going to give you permission and a prescription essentially to go ahead and resume coffee as long as you're drinking the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like you said, with the stroke, I mean, there's some research that shows that coffee reduces stroke risk by what, 22%, something incredible like that. So, I mean, that's almost pharmaceutical level reduction numbers right there.
Oh, no. I mean, that's far and away better than pharmaceuticals because, as we said before, is that if you can lower inflammation, you will lower stroke risk.
Wow.
If you can improve blood vessel health, you will lower stroke risk. If you can lower oxidative stress, you will lower stroke risk. And again, if you can lower the incidence of atrial fibrillation, well, by definition, you will lower stroke risk and rates for sure.
Are your peers basically across the board on board with the whole inflammation is the source of if not all, most chronic disease. Like, do doctors agree on that at this point in 2020?
Yeah, they definitely would agree on that. But again, as I said earlier, it's unfortunate because the vast majority of people who see cardiologists, if they do get tested for inflammation, there's no discussion about the cause.
Right.
There's only discussion about which pharmaceutical they're going to choose, and you're inflamed, so you're going to go on a statin, you're going to take an aspirin, you're going to take an ACE inhibitor or angiotensin receptor blocker. Like, what are all these anti-inflammatory pharmaceuticals? When again, we always need to go back to the foundation of why is the inflammation there? Because, for example, we know if we say inflammation is bad, well, the ultimate anti-inflammatory would be steroids, right? I mean, if you gave someone prednisone, that is the ultimate anti-inflammatory. Yet, if you give prednisone to cardiology patients, they have a higher risk of dying. And we've known that for 40 years. Wow. So the pharmaceutical approach will never be the answer. The answer always is going to be, how do we lower the numbers down by getting rid of what's causing them to be high?
So true. It's simple, critical thinking. Absolutely. As Hippocrates said, let your food be thy medicine. Let thy medicine be thy food. Listen, I couldn't let you off the hook without talking about fat. And maybe a little trigger warning, because we have some medical professionals that listen to the show. I like my coffee. I've got a fast metabolism. I like my coffee with a big helping of either whole milk or whole cream. I know that for the longest time it was like fat equals bad. Now there's all this keto coming out. Now there's all this, paleo, carnivore-based diets coming out. Where are you at with all this, Dr. Wolfson, when it comes to heart health specifically and these fad diets that are high in fat, high in proteins, things like that?
Well, my book, Jordan, is called The Paleo Cardiologist. And I am a paleo guy, a hunter-gatherer guy, ancestral nutrients guy, because number one, the literature supports it. I wrote a chapter in an integrative cardiology textbook for my friend, Dr. Mark Houston at Vanderbilt University. And I've got over 100 references about paleo and heart health. So what makes common sense is also in the scientific literature. Mm-hmm. So back to your question, so again, when it comes to hunter-gatherer foods, I think that, again, we can debate all day long, but again, just follow nature, and that's the way that I roll. Next on that, though, is that I love drinking black coffee. That's the way that I grew up. That's the taste that I love. Mm-hmm. I don't want to me, it's almost like tainting it with something else. Now, sure. Is there medicinal value to adding coconut oil? Yes. Is there medicinal value to adding raw cream? Yes. Or raw milk? That would be my personal preference. I think that, as we mentioned before, it's the sugar. Certainly the synthetic sweeteners are absolute poison. That's not my thing at all. I definitely advise people against that. If people want to use a little bit of sugar, organic sugar, if they want to use some raw honey, I'm okay with that. Right. If they want to add some fats to it, I'm cool with that as well. I guess, once ultimately, right, it is something to be enjoyed, and however you enjoy it, I think is important.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. And, when I look at these wild fad diets, the carnivore diet, keto, vegan, they all have a few things in common. Really, you're not supposed to be eating processed sugars for most of those health conscious diets. Like, you're not supposed to be drinking soda. You're not supposed to be eating the processed buns and crap. Like, I feel like just cutting out that stuff is such a high leverage move. I encourage people to start there. Just cut out the poisons, like your sodas and your French fries, your refined sugars. I mean, really eat what you like from there, and you're probably going to see some good results just from that simple step, in my opinion.
Well, you definitely will. I agree with that. And Jordan, the first thing I tell my patients is to go organic. Get rid of all of the poison out of your food. And I think that, again, it's kind of like telling people just it's okay to drink coffee. And in fact, it's beneficial. Just make sure it's organic.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the food, because that is doable for most people.
Right.
If you're gonna eat chocolate, make it organic chocolate. If you're gonna have ice cream, make it organic ice cream. If you want to drink wine, organic. Beer, organic. Vodka, tequila, organic. Just get the chemicals out of our lives. Let's definitely start with that. And then the other strategies you said, listen, I've got friends that are vegan. I've had patients that are vegan. I think it's totally unnatural. I think it's a major, major problem. If not for the individual, then for subsequent generations, for like a vegan woman who gives birth to a vegan baby. I think that is absolutely catastrophic to health. Personally, I think carnivore is a pretty cool cleanse. I don't necessarily agree with it for a long-term strategy.
That's exactly what I've heard.
It's just not. I'm not saying it doesn't work for some of the people that do it. I'm just saying it's just not natural.
It's not viable long term. I kind of heard that about vegan too. I hear people start to feel way better and they get rid of ailments, but then 6, 16, 26 months down the line, they start falling apart.
Well, to me, the healthiest food on the planet, and I don't think there should be any room for debate, is eating seafood, and specifically whole seafood. So if any of your listeners, for example, get a hold of whole sardines, whole shrimp, and shellfish and clams and oysters, whole anchovies. Yeah, no, and I think that's fantastic too. Believe me, I eat a lot of sardines out of the can, and especially when I was working in the hospitals, I would carry an avocado in one pocket and a can of sardines. I mean, I'm the guy who opens up a can of sardines on the airplane.
Oh no, Dr. Wolfson, no.
Nobody. Right, Jordan? Nobody likes that guy. I have patients that are pilots, and I've asked, I'm like, can I get kicked off a plane for opening sardines? They're like, well, we don't like it, but I can't say you're going to get kicked off the plane. I'm like, okay, then I'm going to keep doing it. But Jordan, I'm talking about the whole sardine with the, they come frozen. You can find them with the head, the heart, the organs. There's no healthier food than that. You can't tell me about kale and dandelion greens and Brussels sprouts. The only way to get omega DHA in a normal and appreciable level is by eating seafood. And DHA is one of the most important nutrients in the body, along with cholesterol.
Jeez.
So that's how we got to get it, by eating those foods. So
absolutely,
I guess at the end of the day, and especially, I mean, I love the coffee in the morning. I love doing that, with bacon and eggs afterwards. And again, I think carnivore and keto are cool for a cleanse, but it's our ancestors were hunter-gatherer, paleo people. Why second guess the wisdom of nature for millions of years?
We just had Leighton Morrison on, who's he's an aquatic microbe specialist, and he was talking about how civilizations always settled where the fresh water met the salt water, and all of the incredible processes that take place, from the animals crossing through the river and trudging up aquatic microbes into the soil across the land, and the humans just being able to plop down and, as you say, eat this whole seafood, survive like some sort of Garden of Eden. Had they had the advancements. Really, really quite incredible, Dr. Wolfson. I love everything you brought today. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I do appreciate it.
No, my absolute pleasure. Appreciate you having me on. And
where can my listeners find out more about you?
Well, you know what? Anybody who wants to, I'd love for you to get a copy of my book. It's free. It's called freeheartbook.com. Just come to the website. You pay shipping and handling in the U.S. of $4.95. Helps keep my staff employed in Arizona. And it's called freeheartbook.com, Amazon bestseller. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can get it from me for free.
Absolutely love it. freeheartbook.com. Dr. Wolfson, one more time, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast and give us such great permission to enjoy our cup of joe and know that our heart will benefit from it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Share the show with a friend. We do appreciate that. Give us a good rating and review. It does help us out. This is Dr. Wolfson and Jordan Rivers signing off, wishing you an extraordinary day. We'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast.